What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan. Today, I'm joined alongside one of the founders of the Next Network, Micahel Mirskiy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mason. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this week, for the game, and for the show.
Yeah, it's a big game for both these teams coming up here on this Sunday. Let's just kind of jump right into it with the injury report, because we've actually got a few big names, more on the Washignton side, but a few big names that have been on the injury report throughout this week. I think the biggest one probably being the status of Brian Robinson. Michael, I don't know if you know, but like Robinson's been the leading rusher for Washignton so far this season, and he's definitely been a big impact in the red zone. So Robinson, who has not practiced at all this entire week, was announced to be a game-time decision. Do you think this running game will be fine without a guy like Robinson in the backfield, or how much do you think Robinson's status is going to play a big role in this game?
Well, I think it should play a big role in this game. I mean, Austin Ekeler, he was also hurt, right? But
he's back now, though. Yeah,
he is back. Okay, so Austin Eckler's back, so that's obviously big. And the other back there is McNichols, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Robinson's been a big part of the run game, because at the end of the day, for how good has Jayden Daniels been, running the ball is where they've had their success. They lead the league in rushing touchdowns, and overall, Robinson and Daniels and Ekeler on the ground have done a great job. Robinson's a big loss for Washington, especially against a team like Baltimore.
Yeah, Baltimore's, we'll get more into this a little bit later, but Baltimore's run defense, one of the best in the league right now. But going back to the injury report, Broderick Washignton was another guy that hasn't practiced this week for Baltimore. How much of an impact has he made so far this season? And do you expect that to be how much of an impact do you expect that to be on Sunday if he's not playing?
Yeah, Washington has a knee injury, and they haven't released the injury report yet, the Ravens, for today, but it could be pretty big, because ultimately that is one of the Ravens' main run stopping guys. So we talk about Brian Robinson. If the Commanders have Brian Robinson, if he ends up playing, and the Ravens don't have a guy like Broderick Washignton, then obviously it doesn't cancel each other out, but at least it'll help Washington still run the ball effectively. Washington does become a pretty big loss, but if you're a Ravens fan, you know the injury problems that the Ravens have had for years now. So Broderick Washignton being, the biggest worry on this Ravens team, injury-wise, is not that bad of a sign. Hopefully the Ravens can have Washington this week, but if not, then they'll just roll like that.
Yeah, Washington's only played 39% of the snaps on that defensive line for Baltimore so far this season. So even if he is absent, I don't expect it to be a major loss, especially guys like Travis Jones there and some other people as well. Beyond that, Baltimore is mostly healthy. I know you guys have dealt with some injuries so far this season, but it seems like mostly everyone's going to be back, have you heard otherwise? Or
yeah, no, as far as I understand, I mean, aside from the players that are on the injured reserve or the PUP, everyone's going to be back. There were some people that didn't practice at some points during the week, but at the end of the day, I think it should be the same or almost the same as last week.
Yeah, Baltimore enters this game, what, 2-3, right?
2-2,
3-2. 3-2. Okay, so 3-2. For this upcoming game, Washington enters at 4-1. Moving on to the Ravens offense, because this is probably one of the best offenses Washington has faced so far this season, beyond Cincinnati, I would say. How do you expect, just looking at this defense overall, do you expect Lamar and this offense led by Todd Monken, do you expect it to be like easy, or what are your kind of expectations for this offense going into Sunday?
Well, look, we got the two best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL going at it this week, and Lamar Jackson is probably the second best quarterback in the NFL, period. Second or third right there with Josh Allen. And yeah, how do the Ravens stop Lamar Jackson? Because as good as the Bengals played offensively last week in their 41-39 or 41-38 shootout, overtime in Cincinnati, they weren't able to stop Lamar Jackson at the end of the day. He still threw for over 300 passing yards, ran the ball well. And the Ravens offense has that added element this year that they didn't have in previous years of a extremely powerful running back in Derrick Henry, one of the best, maybe the best healthy running back in the NFL right now. So Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry is a deadly combination. And Lamar, all you need to really look at is that one play, that one touchdown pass he had to Isaiah Likely. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, where he stiff-armed Sam Hubbard, who's like 300 pounds and all that. I mean, it was just an incredible play. And moments like that is what makes Lamar Jackson so special. Jayden Daniels is building up to that. He hasn't necessarily, we're 5 games in, and he's played great. But, Lamar is definitely hard to stop. And I think in order for the Commanders to stop Lamar, they would need to stop the pieces around Lamar. But then you also have to worry about Derrick Henry. So it gets really tricky. But of the coaches, Dan Quinn, obviously defensive coach, done a great job with Dallas the last couple years, did a great job with Atlanta defensively when he was over there. That's the kind of stuff that a guy like that helps you with.
Yeah. This season, Washington has kind of limited the scrambling quarterbacks so far this year. The ones that they faced, guys like Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. I know Watson overall has had a pretty poor year against everyone, but more looking at the game against Arizona, Kyler had 1 rush the entire game for, I believe, like 4 or 5 yards. Washington has done a great job being able to limit the mobility from the opposing team quarterback so far. And a large part of it is due to the upgrades that they've added in that linebacker room, comparing it to last year with Cody Barton being a starter there and David Mayo. Now you've got a future Hall of Famer in Bobby Wagner. You've got Frankie Louvu, who has been, in my opinion, one of the most underrated defensive players in the league so far this season. He's coming off a 2-sack fumble recovery, 3-sack fumble recovery game, something crazy like that as an off-ball linebacker. So
Louvu's done a great job. Josh and I called the game a couple of weeks ago, the Bengals game on Monday night.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Louvu. Louvu was a great signing, a really good pickup. He was underrated in Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's a big piece of the Commanders right now.
Yeah, I know pretty much the entire Commanders fan base has loved what they've seen at number 4 on that defensive side, as well as some of the other guys on the defensive line starting to pick it up for Washington. Dorrance Armstrong has had a sack, I believe, in each of the last 2 or 3 games for the Commanders. You've got even guys like Clelin Ferrell is making plays, which is pretty crazy to say looking back at his career path journey so far. So I think this defensive line and kind of front 7, we've seen them contain mobile quarterbacks in the past. Will they be able to do it against the best one in the National Football League? We'll have to see. But I'm confident in this Commanders front 7, at least, and limiting Lamar's scrambling ability.
I don't think it's that crazy that Ferrell's broken out. It's always been there. That's not a question. He just needed to get that talent unlocked. Maybe he is not yet the 4th overall pick that Mike Mack thought he would be, but
Yeah. No, it's been a pretty pleasantly surprising season from Ferrell when he's actually out there. He's been kind of in and out. He's been out the last couple of weeks, but when he was on the field early on this season, he was making plays. Moving on to kind of the secondary piece for Washington, because this is where I am very scared of this team. Because right now Benjamin St-Juste is our cornerback 1, and it's not exactly what you want to have as a cornerback 1 in BSJ's skill set. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Forbes is pretty much out of the entire rotation. He only played 4 snaps last week for the Commanders. It's been a lot of Michael Davis, Nori Benogany on the outside, and also Mike Sanders still. Are you confident in guys like Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews to go out and make plays against the secondary for Washington?
Yeah, I think from Baltimore perspective, you should be pretty confident. But at the same time, the Ravens, don't go deep. I feel like as often as, or they either I don't know. I feel when I've seen them, they don't mix it up as much as I would want, and they make it sometimes easy for the opposing secondary. But you mentioned some guys in there that are not that like Sanders still. I was a big fan of coming out of Michigan.
Mm-hmm, me too.
And we saw him in the Senior Bowl, right? Or he was
no.
I
don't think he was. No,
probably not. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But no, Sanders still is a good piece there. And Jeremy Chin has also done a very good job. We're talking about we're talking about Luvu from Carolina, Chin from Carolina also coming in has done well. The thing is, in the back end, definitely it's tough for Washington, and Andrews hasn't gotten quite going yet. But last week was a glimpse of vintage Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
But on the defensive front for Washington, guys like Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne have been there for a long time, and now they finally got pieces on that team, both offensively and defensively, to help them win.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see kind of how Dan Quinn has used his guys and used different players in different positions a lot. I know Ron Rivera, when he was here, preached versatility on the defensive side of the ball and kind of using players in unique ways. You had guys like Landon Collins go on and switch from safety to linebacker, and that was kind of the most notable one. But there were some other times as well, and especially towards the end of his kind of time in Washington, it was not so great because he started experimenting like too much, and it got too confusing for the players. Multiple players came out and said that just the packages and the play calls were just too confusing. There's too much going on in Rivera's kind of scheme. But now you have Quinn coming in, and Quinn brought kind of his version of what like versatility and means to his team. And guys like Jeremy Chin, who's played both like up in the box, he's played deep. Players like Frankie Luvu has lined up, like gone in like Tampa 2 coverages and cover 3, and he's playing like that deep half of the field or the deep third, or he's going to be lined up on the line of scrimmage and he's rushing the passer off the edge. So he brought in him and Adam Peters, brought in a lot of players that can play multiple positions over this past offseason, which made me very excited because I feel like that was somewhat of a vision that Ron Rivera had, except he, one, never could find the right players to actually play those positions, and two, kind of came at it from a slightly more traditional perspective, and it kind of messed things up a little bit more. But I think Quinn kind of knows how to implement more complex defenses over time, especially with Joe Witt as well, because early on in the season when Washington's defense really struggled against Tampa Bay, against who they play week 2? I'm blanking.
Giants.
Giants, yeah. Against the Giants. When the defense kind of struggled, it was kind of more that complex feel. But then after the Giants game, I think it was after the Cincinnati game, and I can't remember who actually said it. Maybe it was Jeremy Chin or one of the outside corners, but they said they kind of simplified the offense a little bit. The defense against Arizona. And it really worked. Even though it was maybe more simplified and less complex, they held Arizona at only 14 points. And then last week against Cleveland, again, Cleveland's offense isn't, the best in the league, but they limited them to 13 points, I think it was. So it's been great to see kind of Joe Witt find his rhythm as a defensive coordinator. Same with Dan Quinn here in Washington, and see this defense kind of get better over time over the last few weeks. Do you think Washington's more recent success on defense is more towards the teams that they've played or in the offenses that they played, or is it actually them getting better?
I think they've gotten better. I mean, when you have a rookie quarterback, or really any quarterback that's coming into a team for the first time, you shouldn't expect to be great, right out of the gate. And Washington we're talking about the first 2 weeks, they were slow. They didn't get in the end zone. And then all of a sudden, week 3, Monday Night Football, they woke up. Jayden and Terry got their connection going. And the rest has been just dominance. 3 weeks of dominance between the games against Cincinnati, Arizona, and Cleveland. And the offense has done a very good job, and I think they should continue. This is probably the best defense they've played this year. And they're on the road. They don't go very far, but they're on the road. I actually expect a good amount of Washington fans to be at the game. I'll be at the game. I expect a good amount of Washington fans to be. Are you going to go to the game?
I'm not. No, I'm in college now in Philadelphia. So yeah.
Well, yeah. No, but yeah, I expect to be to be a fun environment there in Baltimore, and here in Baltimore, I should say. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. I think the Commanders can keep it going there.
Yeah, I guess this is kind of a good transition to the offensive side. With Jayden, where were you on Jayden coming out as like a prospect out of LSU, and where did you kind of have him? Like I had him as my QB3, and I still had a first round grade on him, but I was a Drake May guy going into the draft. I still believe in Drake May. That hasn't like wavered or anything off of just 5 games. But where were you? What were your thoughts on Jayden Daniels in that draft process?
Same boat as you. I was more of a Drake May guy, so I had Daniels at 3. But I mean, it's not like this came out of nowhere. We're talking about the best quarterback in the country last year, right, in college football. Like Jayden Daniels deserved to win the Heisman. He had Heisman moments, and he played like this. I mean, I don't think that has much to do with anything. I mean, look at Brock Purdy, look at Lamar Jackson, right, 5th quarterback drafted. That was like a class similar to this one we just had with 5 quarterbacks that year, right? It was Mayfield, Allen, Darnold, Rosen, and Lamar, and then 6 quarterbacks this year. Daniels being the second one to go after Caleb and before Drake May, Bo Nixon, or Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix. And
McCarthy. You forgot McCarthy.
McCarthy, right? Okay.
Yeah, McCarthy.
See, I was confused there. You saw me like thinking. I was like, who am I missing? Right, JJ, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go. I also had Drake, and we'll see him this week for the first time against Houston.
Yep.
And I think they could do a good job there. He could do a good job there, but I think Jayden has done a great job.
Yeah, I think where Jayden's kind of I mean, I've like followed Washington, of course, like more than you have, but because I'm a fan. But just from what I've seen from Jayden through the first 2 months, was it 1 month of the season, and then in like preseason and training camp as well, it's just his growth as a player creating out of structure. Now, what I mean by that is like, okay, now he was one of the best out of structure creators last season, of course, at LSU. Most of the time, when he was out of the pocket, that guy was running, and man, he was a phenomenal runner. But now we're seeing more of, hey, he's gonna roll out to his right. He's under pressure. He's kind of on the run, but he's keeping his eyes downfield more. We saw it last week against Cleveland, the throw to Terry, the 60-something yard pass to Terry at the beginning of the game. There was another play that he found Terry for a first down, I believe on the following drive. It's just he's willing to keep his eyes downfield more, which is something that you did not see a lot of at LSU, and that was one of my concerns about him. But he's been able to develop under Cliff Kingsbury, Tavita Pritchard, and those guys in Washington, and we've seen improvement there. We've seen improvement across the middle of the field. He's willing to let it rip. What has impressed you the most out of Jayden so far this season?
His poise, his composure. Again, I mentioned he's a rookie quarterback, and he didn't get deterred after the disappointing first 2 games, which they won, one of them, but thanks to Austin Seibert. But look, he has done a really good job, comfortable in the NFL, comfortable playing with his offense, with Cliff Kingsbury, trusting Cliff Kingsbury, doing what needed to be done, and more on top of that. He's not afraid to run, but he also, throws. He's not forcing any runs, which Lamar Jackson struggled with at the start of his career, is forcing runs. Like this first start was against Cincinnati, 2018, his rookie season. He actually set the franchise record for rushes by anybody, and not even a quarterback, by a running back or quarterback. Lamar he's still, I don't even consider him a run first quarterback at this point of the year. I think he's developed into somebody that sees the field a lot better, doesn't force runs, and Jayden's doing that right off the bat, which is very impressive.
Yeah. I agree with you in terms of the poise. I talked about it on like past episodes, but he was someone who played for LSU in the SEC. That's a guy who, in college, he was playing in crazier environments than what he will ever play in the NFL. Like louder environments, the primetime SEC games, all of that. He played at Alabama, at Georgia. And so that's something that I was kind of not like worried about with him in terms of coming in, and especially that Monday night game in Cincinnati. I was like, some people were saying, oh, it's going to be a crazy environment, primetime game for Jayden. Will he live up to the pressure that's on him? And in terms of like poise and making like stupid decisions as a passer, I didn't expect him to have any, because like he's been there before. Like, and that's kind of what you've seen out of him week in and week out, especially in the last month. He acts like he's been there before, which is cool to see from a Commanders quarterback, because we have not had that in quite some time.
Exactly.
But the defense though that he's going up against this week is definitely going to be the hardest defense he goes up against so far this season. What are your thoughts on how to stop Jayden Daniels in this offense that has been the best in the league through the last 3 weeks?
Well, it's very difficult, and the way we started the show was talking about Brian Robinson Jr., and I think that is a big part of the answer to your question here. If they're without Brian Robinson Jr., that puts a lot more pressure on Jayden Daniels to throw and run. So naturally, as the game progresses, the energy could go down, whatever. I think the Ravens should try to keep Washington off the field, because they're very good at scoring points, obviously. And the Ravens need to put up points early to establish a lead and not lose it, because that is what Washington's been doing, right? When they dominated against Arizona, that happened like quickly. Cleveland quickly off the bat.
Yep.
Even Cincinnati, they went.
We never trailed that game.
Yeah, never trailed, never punted, never turned over the ball. Neither team did, which was very impressive. But point is, once Washington gets it going, they don't stop. So it's important for the Ravens to get a stop early and get them off the field.
Yeah. I think that's a good point you make in terms of, like, Washington hasn't trailed in the last 3 weeks. Maybe they did against Cincinnati at the very beginning. Yeah, they did at the very beginning of that game when Jamar scored a touchdown. But beyond that, like, Jayden and this offense haven't been on the field when they're trailing against Arizona or against Cleveland. So what if, let's say, Baltimore receives the kick at the beginning, they go down, score a touchdown? How will Jayden respond from being down? And even in later in the game scenarios, what if they're down in the third quarter by a possession or the fourth quarter? Will we have to see like one of those Jayden Daniels game-winning drives towards the end, or potential game-winning drives towards the end of that game? How will he step up in that scenario? So that's something to keep an eye on. Also, you mentioned just keeping Washington off the field. Opposing running backs against this Washington defense are averaging over 5.5 yards per carry this season. And the running backs we've gone up against are Zach Moss, Chase Brown, and James Conner's kind of nice, but Devin Singletary, like, the running backs we're going up against right now are not great, or are not supposed to be good. And now we're going up against, of all running backs, Derrick Henry. So that scares me.
It's a big jump, yeah. You think I have a good point, though. Like, last week, Cleveland split carries. Jerome Ford and Dante Foreman each had 9 carries. So, like, it really, this is a much bigger test. And again, it's not just Derrick Henry, it's Lamar Jackson too, and Justice Hill gave the ball occasionally as well. But Lamar is just as big of a rushing threat as Henry is. And they like to mix it up. Flowers gets not carries, but he'll get like jet sweeps, end arounds, whatever. They got a couple fast receivers. They, like to run it with 2 or 3 tight ends. They have 3 tight ends that were very productive last week. Charlie Kohler being arguably the best one in that game. So, yeah, the Ravens have a really fun offense, and it'll be very interesting to see how the Commanders' defense, combats them.
Yeah. So when Washington's offense is on the field, though, something that I've noticed, at least when Washington struggled, especially in that Cleveland game, was when so Jayden, he's thrown, I believe, he has the second highest rate of like passes behind the line of scrimmage so far this season.
Yep.
Now he actually has, like, I think, one of the highest EPAs from doing that. But last week when they struggled against Cleveland's defense early on in that game, was because players like Jeremiah Wusu-Kormoa and some of their other linebackers were flying to the wall. And that scares me against this Baltimore defense because you've got two players, Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton, who tend to live in the backfield at times. And you feel like they can cover sideline to sideline. They're everywhere. And so when you're going up against two players like that, Jayden really seems to struggle if that quick game isn't working, if those screens aren't working. It really seems to bother Jayden a little bit, at least in that Cleveland game at the beginning of the game. Now they figured it out towards that in that second quarter and then in that second half. But how big of a factor do you think players like Roquan and Kyle Hamilton will have to play in this game for Baltimore to win?
Yeah, they're always got to, have a big impact for Baltimore to win. Kyle Hamilton is an all-around player, and he's a great weapon to have. Mm-hmm. With his versatility and where the Ravens play him, which is everywhere. Like you were talking about with Frankie Louvu, Kyle Hamilton is even more than that. Like he's literally playing everywhere on the field. So I think that's very important. Roquan Smith, obviously, is the rock of that defense. So it's new for a guy like Jayden Daniels to face a defense with this much talent at every single part of the field. So it's going to be a big test for him on Sunday. And I'm very curious to see how he does.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's kind of the preview. I'm going to go into, first off, before I get into my score prediction, do you have any final thoughts about this game? Final keys to win, anything like that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm super intrigued into the matchup. I think this could be, Josh said it, my co-host Josh said, and I actually agree with him. I think if the Ravens win, it won't be very close. If the Commanders win, it will go down to the wire. The line, though, I will say is 6.5. And from a Ravens fan perspective, I do not like that. I think that is way too high for how good the Commanders
way too high. Okay.
Yeah, that is way too high for how good the Commanders have been playing this year. I think this should be, closer to even than 6.5. I would maybe do like 1.5. I don't even know if I would have the Ravens as favorite. I mean, if I were to,
no, I'd say they're definitely favorites, like by 3.5, 4.5. I would say.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I feel like I've been super impressed with the Commanders. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe Vegas.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I think one of the big things is that they haven't gone up against an elite team yet, or like really a top 10, a team that's considered like a top 10 team. So I think that'll be the big thing. All right, my final score prediction here in this one, I'm going Baltimore 33, Washignton 28. Okay. I think Baltimore wins. I think it'll be close as well. I think turnovers could become a factor, especially for that offense Washington has. Jayden has thrown a pick in each of his last two games. Now he's going up against an even better secondary. I know one of the best things that he did in college was not turning the ball over. He's made a few questionable decisions so far in the last couple of weeks against some pretty poor defenses. I'm a big Zach Orr guy. I like this Ravens defense a lot. It's going to come down to the wire. I got Baltimore winning. Michael, I know you're not going to give your score prediction here, so where can people find your score prediction and all your other stuff?
Josh and I have been doing this show for the last 5 years, and I was doing it before that. This is our 5th season doing this show, and I was doing it by myself before that. But we have our kickoff show every Sunday morning where we go through every single game and pick the score for every single game. So that is going to be on Twitch. Just look up The Next Network on Twitch, and you'll find us Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time.
Sounds good. Well, Michael, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on, and it's going to be a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, good luck to you and the Commanders.
Yeah, that'll do it for today's episode of Keeping Up with Commanders. See you guys in the next one. Peace.